Hi, I have a serious problem with these Christmas Claymation movies. Now you might be wondering why a single man in his mid-20s would have a problem with these beloved Christmas classics that are over 50 years old. But in order to answer that, I have to take you back to my birth. Yes, that is important for the video. You see, shortly after I was born, I was handed a list of Christmas movies by my parents. They said that these were the movies that I was going to grow up watching every single year at Christmas time. And I responded with something like, okay, that's a bit weird, I'm like 5 months old, but okay. But the list was made up of all of your classic Christmas movies, you know, like the Santa Claus, Polar Express, The Grinch, A Christmas Story. Not Elf, that is a mid-Christmas movie. Fight me. And then at the very bottom of the list were these three claymation movies: Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and The Year Without a Santa Claus. Which, by the way, fun fact, technically all these characters are puppets, so it's technically not fully claymation. Anyway, so I stuck to that list for the last 20 years or so, altering it a little bit here and there with my family, but for the most part keeping it the same. And those three claymation movies are and will forever be a requirement to watch every single year, which is completely fine by me. I love these movies, these are classics. However, I've noticed in the last couple years that my family and I tend to make fun of these movies specifically a bit more and more. Now, for those of you who have been to my channel before, you know that I make fun of every movie I watch, even if for the first time. But with these movies specifically, my family and I rip them to shreds. We point out mistakes, continuity errors, problematic tendencies that deal with sexism and discrimination. We go the full 9 yards. And today, I want to try to figure out why that is. See, I don't actually have a problem with watching these movies. I have a problem with how I watch them. And I do have a few theories as to why I watch them the way I do. The first is that maybe since we've seen them so many times, we need new ways of enjoying them. You guys know the feeling, right? Like when you get a song stuck in your head and you're listening to it on repeat, but then eventually you get tired of listening to it over and over again? Maybe making fun of these movies is our way of not getting tired of watching them. But my other theory is much more complicated. Maybe the Christmas magic in my family is gone. I am an adult now, whether I'd like to admit it or not. I have real life struggles like not being able to find a girlfriend, not being able to afford rent and groceries, and not being able to make a video more successful than Clone Wars Camp Math. There might not be any magic left in my soul. All that remains could be the crushing weight of existence. And maybe the comments my parents have been making about these films have always been there, but they hesitated to say them because they didn't want to risk me losing the magic any earlier than I should. And because of that, maybe we've all channeled our negativity, and instead of dealing with it like we probably should, we wallow in our own self-pity and transfer that negativity into dark, humorous comments aimed at whatever we watch. And maybe these films just happen to have a lot to comment about. But again, that's just a theory. So today, we're gonna watch all these movies together, and I'm gonna point out every single joke, comment, or critique we have ever made about them in hopes to figure out psychologically why we as a family feel the need to treat these movies specifically so harshly. So without further ado, let's ruin your holidays by insulting some beloved Christmas movies. Starting off with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 1964. We begin with some newspaper headlines that read, "The sticky problem of Gertie's toffee apples? Moonshot is right on target? House votes more Social Security?" Sick. Anyway, then we meet creepy snowman Uncle Sam. Seriously, I barely trust humans with that type of facial hair, let alone a snowman. I would not let my child near him.
What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a talking snowman before?
Yeah, in Hot Frosty with the somewhat hot guy. Also, why is the sky green? Seriously, is that a technical thing or is that a stylistic choice?
Nice around here, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Why is the sky green? Then we get introduced to arguably the worst depiction of Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. First, we have Mrs. Claus, who has some weird infatuation of getting Santa fat. I'm sure there's a word or fetish for that type of thing, but I don't want to submit myself to that part of the internet by looking it up. And then we have Santa, who's a skinny dick. And no, I don't mean he has a skinny dick. That would be weird information to know about a person, let alone a puppet from the 60s. I mean that he is simply skinny and also a dick. But we'll get to that second part later. Despite that, I don't blame Santa for not wanting to eat when you take a look at his food, if that's what you want to call it. It literally looks like expired Play-Doh. Not to mention, it's the exact same color as the plate, the utensils, and the table itself. It's like if you went to that room in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where everything's edible, except everything also happened to be an ugly maroon color.
Now, don't any of you worry your heads about Santa. Mrs. Claus will have him plenty fattened up by Christmas Eve. It's always the same story.
Yeah, that's a form of abuse, I think, Sam. And that's also just plain weird. Anyway, then Sam starts talking about Rudolph and discovers that we, the viewers, have never heard of Rudolph. Then he goes into the famous song, which I find ironic because in the song, the line reads, "Do you recall the most famous reindeer of all?" Clearly, we as the viewers don't recall Rudolph, we just established that we don't know who he is. Anyway, then we learn who Rudolph is. This is also where we meet his discriminatory and sexist father, Donner. Yes, I'm using those words to describe a reindeer in a children's movie. But as per the entire plot, Rudolph is born with a red nose.
He's got a shiny nose.
Shiny? I'd even say it glows.
Well, we'll simply have to overlook it.
Alright, well the mom is not that great either. Even if she was trying to be nice, that's an odd way of putting it. Donner, on the other hand, is an asshole.
Now, how can you overlook that?
Speaking of assholes, Santa shows up to meet Rudolph and immediately makes the claim that he better lose the nose if he hopes to pull his sleigh someday, which I don't know why that matters, but whatever. Then he goes into song, which my dad always likes to point out is the most egotistical song you could ever sing. He literally sings about how he's the king and how you'd be lucky enough to be one of the 8 reindeers to pull his sleigh. He's literally just singing about why him and his mission is so great without explaining why. Just that it is. A reminder that this is his first time meeting Rudolph. So he literally shows up, says lose the nose, says I'm the king, says you'll be lucky to pull my sleigh someday, drops the mic, and leaves. But Donner agrees with the skinny dick and decides that the only option is to put literal shit on his son's face to cover up his nose. That's the solution. I don't know about you, but I feel like social services would have some concerns about that. Anyway, then we get to the scene that originally broke my depth perception, size to scale ratio, and logical thinking. Rudolph and Donner are playing in the snow, and we get our first glimpse at the abominable snow monster. And he's big. Like I'm talking super duper mega big. He blocks out the sun, and his legs are at least 10 feet tall in this scene. But when you think about what he looks like later in the film, all of this gets thrown out the window. For the rest of the movie, he's got fairly stumpy legs, and he's probably only like 10 feet tall total, if that. In the first shot we see of him, Rudolph may be the size of like his feet, but later in the film, he's about as tall as the Bumble's legs. The proportional math ain't mathin'. But along with that too, if we look at this scene, the Bumble is right next to the snowbank in which Rudolph and Donner are hiding. So the Bumble could simply slightly turn his head and look down and he would have immediately seen them. Nice job protecting your son, Donner. That was a terrible hiding spot. Also, why is the sky green? Anyway, then we meet Hermie, and you can easily tell which one Hermie is by 2 factors. Factor 1 is that he's got the white part of his eyes, while the rest of the elves have the soulless beads. The other factor is that he's not an elf. It boggles my mind that no one in this movie questions this. He has round ears, blonde flowy hair, and he doesn't like to make toys. This is basic math right here.
What's eating you, boy?
I just don't like to make toys.
What? Hermie doesn't like to make toys.
Herbie doesn't like to make toys. Herbie doesn't like to make toys.
Okay, there's no way this room is any bigger than a 10 foot by 10 foot room. In what world do you have to whisper that to the person next to you to make sure they heard it? Especially when in a shot earlier you can clearly see all of them hearing whatever goatee guy was saying.
Well, sir, someday I'd like to be a dentist.
A dentist?
Well, we need one up here.
I agree, Hermie, you do. I was originally gonna say you guys don't, considering none of you up there has any teeth, but then I realized that may actually be the problem itself. So good on you for taking the initiative. Anyway, then he sings, questioning why he's a misfit, which again we've already established, he's not an elf, so of course he doesn't fit in.
Well, such is the life of an elf.
He's not an elf. Anyway, back to Rudolph. Donner comes up with another way of hiding his nose, by covering it up with what looks like the bottom of a chair. You know, the little things that you put at the bottom to make sure the chairs don't slide or scratch or whatever. Anyway, very, very different than covering it up with mud.
It's not very comfortable.
There are more important things than comfort. Self-respect.
Yeah, I agree, Donner. You know, I usually like to cover parts of my face up with shit because I respect myself. That makes sense. But then Rudolph ventures out to meet the other fawns and does.
Where are we going? To the reindeer games. It's a great way to show off in front of the does.
Youth.
No, you stay your ass away from the youth, Uncle Sam. Then we get to the elf song in which the goatee guy is the most kiss-ass little bitch I've ever seen, literally changing his voice in front of Santa in order to please him.
All out for elf practice!
Okay, Santa. Now let's try out the new elf song I wrote.
It's here too, where Santa is a straight asshole.
Well, let's get this over with.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear from my audience before I perform. Sounds like an old college story of mine that I don't want to get into today. Then we get the song that lasts way too long, only for Santa to say,
Well, it needs work. I have to go.
Like he's such a dick. I can't be the only one thinking that, right? Then we cut back to Hermie trying to be a dentist.
Now, this won't hurt a bit.
Yeah, because a hammer to someone's teeth is perfectly harmless.
Now listen. We have dolls that cry, talk, walk, blink, and run a temperature.
Yeah, do you have a doll that can get depressed? That's foreshadowing, by the way, if you know, you know. But Hermie agrees that he'll never fit in and decides to venture out into the green void that apparently is the sky, saying he'll go on his own, which I'm sure is correct and he'll be completely independent going forward. Then we meet Coach Comin, who teaches Rudolph how to fly. Sort of. And it's here where the Compton household unfortunately says some of Comet's lines unironically, such as,
I want to be your pal, right?
and
Yeah!
yeah, we say those lines just like that around the house, but I feel too cringe to repeat those myself in this video. Then we meet Clarice, where Rudolph somehow has the most unsurmountable riz I've ever seen.
Something wrong with your nose?
What's so funny about the way I talk?
Well, don't get angry. I don't mind.
Then why'd you say it, Clarice? Why'd you say it? No one ever just says, hey, what's up with that disgusting nonconformity you have? Not that I mind. So what'd you mean by that? Anyway, she calls Rudolph cute, and Rudolph gets off on that. And no, I don't mean sexually. These are baby reindeer, you degenerate fucks. I mean, he literally gets off the ground and starts flying because of her comment. Y'all are sick if you were thinking anything else. But then the bottom of the chair comes off his face, and everyone finally sees his red nose.
Donner, you should be ashamed of yourself. What a pity.
Yes, Santa, because it was Donner's fault. Not to mention that you already knew about the nose, so the fact that you're acting surprised is surprising. But anyway, Rudolph runs away because everyone starts making fun of him, just like the famous song, but Clarice catches up to him.
Rudolph, you promised to walk me home.
But I wasn't very lucky today, was I? I wish
There's always tomorrow.
Yeah, Clarice, can you let Rudolph finish his thought? He was in the middle of speaking when you rudely interrupted him. With a 3-minute song, no less. But then Clarice's father takes her away and Rudolph meets Hermie.
Who are you?
Well, actually, I am a dentist.
Yeah, you know, when I meet someone and they ask me who I am, I always like to respond with my occupation rather than my name. But Hermie and Rudolph decide to venture off together, independently. That's math.
Who decides the test of what is really best? We'll reconcile.
What the fuck? Then we finally get back to the thing that scared my mother when she was a child. The Bumble, who again looks to be about the size of a mountain until, well, the very next scene, where we meet the legendary Yukon Cornelius, who's searching for silver and gold. Then we get the song for it, in which I have a problem. Now, I am no musical expert by any means, but I can't be the only one here who doesn't hear a damn banjo.
Silver and gold, silver and gold.
Now, maybe it's there, and I'm a dumbass, but I will never admit when I'm wrong, and I'm telling you, there's no banjo. Or if there is one, it's not even close to being the most prominent instrument being played. So what the hell is Sam doing? Like, look at this scene here.
Sparkling happy tree, silver and gold.
No sound gets added here when he starts playing again, except for a clarinet, which clearly this is not. Whatever. Anyway, then the Bumble catches up, again with the most disproportional body type from scene to scene, and they escape on a block of ice. I do want to point out one little thing though. Yukon always carries around his pickaxe like it's Minecraft, and I know from Minecraft that a pickaxe would not be the best weapon to use against a mob, so I understand why he didn't use it against the Bumble. However, what he also has is a gun. Use the gun. I don't know a better reason for him to have a gun except for, oh, I don't know, to defend himself against a giant snow monster when a snow monster would attack him? Use the gun. Anyway, then we get to sexism. It's the part where Donner says this.
Mrs. Donner wanted to go along, naturally, but Donner said, no, this is man's work.
See, we need to establish, first and foremost, that this was made in the 60s. That's all I have to say about that. Then Rudolph and the gang finds their way to the island of misfit toys, an island that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We're introduced to all of the misfit toys, and I want to take a moment and try and debunk as many of them as I can to prove that they're not misfits. First off, an elephant with polka dots. Have you ever been to a Build-A-Bear in the last 50 years? This is a normal occurrence there, I guarantee you. A Charlie in the Box. Dude, just change your name. No kid would give a shit or would even know you had a different name. A water pistol that shoots jelly is sick as fuck. I would choose that over the water option. Yeah, I'm sure the jelly is old and heavily processed, probably tastes like shit, but hell, I'd eat it. A bird that doesn't fly but swims. What even in the fuck is this one? You're a toy. Like you're a toy. I wouldn't expect my toy birds to fly or swim. Again, as a kid, I wouldn't give a shit. A cowboy who rides an ostrich, I've seen worse. Now, a boat that can't stay afloat, yeah, that one's fair. Bath time would suck if all of my boats sank. And then a train with square wheels, yeah, that one's fair too. That would not be a pleasant experience playing with those toys. But then we get to the doll. Oh, the doll. One of the most heavily theorized parts of this movie is trying to figure out what makes this doll a misfit. I mean, she seems normal. She doesn't have any visual non-conformities. So what is it? Now, if you do a little bit of research, you will find that the general consensus is that this doll has depression. She's depressed. Keep in mind that this was the 60s, so the fact that they're acknowledging mental health at all is insane. But then you have to think about the fact that in the context of this movie, that person with mental health problems was sent away to an island away from the rest of civilization. Also, she's a doll. How the hell did kids know she had depression? Like, does she have a string on her back like Woody from Toy Story that when you pull the string, she has like cryptic messages or something? Keep the drapes closed. I don't want to get out of bed today. Life has no meaning, so what's the point? Death is a part of the journey, but I like to get to that part sooner rather than later. Anyway, then we meet King Moonraiser, who's like this flying Pegasus lion thing, whose goal in life is to find unwanted toys and turn them into his own personal slaves. Seriously, remember that elephant with the polka dots I mentioned earlier? Here's him literally being his butler. But Rudolph and the gang want to live there, and Moonraiser straight up says no. But when you go home, you better send Santa to come help him and his toys. Which I don't know why Rudolph would want to help him when Moonraiser wasn't going to help them, but whatever. So they decide first thing in the morning they'll head back home, but Rudolph is worried that his nose will lead the Bumble to them and put his friends in danger. So he decides to go off on his own, leaving the door wide open so his friends will freeze to death in the middle of the night. But Rudolph finds his way back home, somehow taking the longest route possible because it seems like it's been months, even though it only took him a day to do the first part of the journey. And then he finds Santa, and Santa explains that his family is still out looking for him.
And I'm very worried. Christmas Eve is only 2 days off, and without your father, I'll never be able to get my sleigh off the ground.
Yeah, I want you guys to remember what Santa just said there because that will be important later. Then Rudolph finds the Bumble's home where his family and Clarice also happen to be. Then he fights the Bumble a bit. He gets hit by a boulder that should absolutely have killed him, but this is a children's movie, so of course, plot armor.
Oh, why doesn't he get it over with?
You little bitch, Clarice. Do you want Rudolph to die? Anyway, then Yukon and Hermie find the cave after not freezing to death and end up tricking the Bumble to come outside and being knocked out by a boulder himself. Then, because Hermie's a dentist, he ends up pulling out all of the Bumble's teeth, because that's apparently what you do as a dentist. You either hit teeth with a hammer or you pull them out entirely. That's it. But because of that, the Bumble is no longer a threat, which makes literally no sense because we never saw him use his mouth as a weapon. We only saw him use his hands as a weapon, which he still has, so he should still be just as menacing. But then Yukon makes the ultimate sacrifice, while still not using the gun.
Yukon! He's gone!
Well, they are all very sad at the loss of their friend.
That was probably the fastest switch up I've ever seen. From he's gone to, well, we were all very sad. Also, he says this.
But they realize that the best thing to do is to get the women back to Christmas Town.
Yeah, it's the 60s, people. But they all find their way home and even get some apologies from Santa and Donner, which are 100% half-assed and not entirely genuine because later Donner says this.
I knew that nose would be useful someday. I knew it all along.
But then Yukon and the Bumble come back. Because reasons. The Bumble turns good because reasons. And Santa becomes fat unhealthily quick because reasons. Then the final plot comes into play that the weather will be too bad to navigate for Christmas, unless they had, oh, I don't know, a reindeer that had a red glowing nose. So Santa and everyone else takes advantage of Rudolph's nonconformity in order to save Christmas. This is also where, dude, Sam, what are you doing? What is this weird stalker shit perking into the window? But remember what I told you guys all to remember a few minutes ago about what Santa said. He said that he needs Donner in order to pull his sleigh. Well, fun fact, Donner doesn't even go. Santa goes off with only 7 reindeer, one of them being Rudolph. So that means Donner and one other reindeer sat out on this one. Why the fuck then was it so important to get Donner back when you could have easily pulled the sleigh with only 7 reindeer? Anyway, they set off into the big storm that we never really see, and they make their way to the island of misfit toys.
I haven't any dreams left to dream. We'll never get off this island.
Okay, yeah, she definitely has problems, for sure. But the movie ends with everything working out. Rudolph gets to pull Santa's sleigh, Christmas isn't canceled, and the misfit toys get their second chance. Except for the bird. They clearly established that the bird couldn't fly. It could only swim. That's why it was considered a misfit. So the movie literally ends with this elf sending that bird to its death by not giving it an umbrella. This movie ends with literal murder. Now, I talked a lot of shit about this movie, more than any sane person should, but I guarantee you, it's only gonna get worse from here. Now we move on to Santa Claus is Coming to Town from 1970. A good 6 years since Rudolph. Let's see if this movie does any better in terms of sexism or discrimination. Spoiler, it does not. But we begin with Fred Astaire's character, who reads letters from, and I'm quoting my mother here, dumbass kids who don't know how to write the letter E properly. And to answer all of their questions, Fred decides to tell the complete story of Santa from start to finish. And it begins in a town called Sombertown, obviously the happiest place on Earth, near the North Pole where it has pink snow that fades away in the blink of an eye. There we meet Burgermeister Meisterburger, the town mayor, who finds a baby on his doorstep.
I, Burgermeister Meisterburger, take care of a baby? Outrageous!
Simply put, the Burgermeister tells the baby to fuck off and go to the orphan asylum, which after looking at the creepy ass sign for the asylum, I don't blame the mother for thinking that the Burgermeister was the lesser of the two evils. Anyway, his lieutenant ends up losing baby Santa because he's pulling him by his sleigh instead of carrying him like he did before, but luckily the animals around the forest manage to find the baby and hide him from the Winter Warlock, this magical evil wizard who resides in his two-dimensional castle up in the mountains. Though I don't quite get the animals thinking here because in the first shot they cover the baby with a bunch of sticks, but in the literal next shot they're escaping with the baby in hand, but whatever. Then they take the baby to the home of the Kringles, or this movie's version of the elves, in which I'm not going to question the family tree as it is made up of 5 old men and 1 old lady who I assume is the mother of the 5 old men. I don't really know, they called her the elf queen, but when they show her the baby she says,
"Oh, baby, what a splendid idea."
Yes, that is exactly what I would say if a baby showed up on my doorstep. What a splendid idea. That makes sense. But they end up raising Santa as one of their own and end up calling him Kris Kringle. It's here where I realize I must have subconsciously stolen the exact chalkboard from their home to use in my own videos. It's literally the same frame color and everything. And then we learn that the Kringles specialize in toy making, but that they have no one to give it to. Clearly business strategy is not their forte. If I was a bigger YouTuber, this would have been the perfect time to tell you about like a Shopify sponsorship or something to help the Kringles grow their business, but I am not that lucky and this video is not sponsored, so please like the video and subscribe. Thank you. But then they sing an entire song about quality toy making, which I find humorous since they keep talking about how their problem is quantity. But we get introduced to many of the toys they make, such as a Jack-in-the-Box, which I so wish one of them popped up and said, "I'm Charlie." It's not my best impression, but we also see kangaroos, some big dolls, and some toy boats. I bring these ones up specifically because I will call back to them later, so try to remember them. But then Chris grows up and learns how to laugh from a seal, which is weird, and then becomes big enough to go over the mountain where he can give away their toys.
Well, years went by, and finally Chris was a fine young man. I'm a man now, Tanta.
Yes, you are, and this is man's work. But Chris decides he wants to go to Sombertown and deliver some of their toys. For free. Again, I don't know how the elves have managed to live this long without making a profit, but whatever. Anyway, he gets the fancy red suit and heads to the mountain where the Winter Warlock is because he needs to get through there in order to get to Sombertown. There, he meets Topper the Penguin, who serves no real purpose other than just being there, but he ends up making his way through the mountains because the Warlock just decides kinda, yeah, I'll let you pass, but next time when you come back, there'll be trouble, I mean it. Anyway, back at Sombertown, Burgermeister gets injured from a toy duck that was not there in the first shot, but showed up in the second, and then the doctor uses the power of a thermometer to say that he broke his funny bone on his head. That's science. And then he sings a whole ass song about how he hates toys and wants them outlawed. Seriously, that's the plot. They even make a poster that looks like it was written by a 5-year-old outlawing the toys. No kidding. Then we literally see it happen. The guards take all the toys away. You know, a question my mother has always asked is why did they feel the need to make the story of Santa take place in a time somewhat similar to Nazi Germany? Genuine question. And that's not even that far-fetched of a comparison because there's literally a scene later of them burning toys just like how the Nazis burned books. Anyway, then Chris shows up and all of the Scrooges of the town, which is everyone, get mad at him for existing and then get scared when he says he has toys. Then he meets these 2 desaturated kids with gray hair washing their stockings.
You better watch out. Better not cry. Better not pout.
Why?
I'm telling you why.
Yeah?
'Cause I came to town.
Yeah, so Chris is a passive-aggressive manipulator, and clearly he's also never seen Inside Out, so he doesn't know that sadness can be mentally and emotionally beneficial if used in moderation. It is okay to cry and pout every once in a while, Santa. What, you expect me to be happy watching Bing Bong die? But he gives them a pile of toys. Toys that in no way resemble the toys that the Kringles were making and showing us earlier. Remember how I said to remember the toys that I asked you to remember? Where are the kangaroos? Where's the big dolls? Where's the Charlie in the box? Man, I'm usually pretty good at that impression. I can't do it today. Then we get arguably my dad and I's favorite bit from all of these movies, where the one kid goes to get his friends to come play with the toys, and his friends were all just standing off screen about 3 feet away. Literally, what were you guys doing? And then we meet Jessica, who for some reason looks visually different from everyone else in this movie, and Chris wins her affection by giving her a doll. Obviously, her love language is gift giving. Then we really start getting into the problematic nature of this film. Does anyone watching remember this screen? Or this one? For those who don't, this is cable on-demand and DVR recording pages from about 15 to 20 years ago. It's where you would record movies and shows if you happen to miss them live on television. And my family and I always made sure we had these 3 Christmas Claymation movies recorded on that DVR because we didn't have physical copies, and back then we couldn't just watch them on Prime Video or Hulu. Of course, times have changed and now we can watch them pretty much anywhere. But little did we know that the versions of these movies we watched on television were not the full versions. There were full songs, deleted scenes, and extended scenes that were cut when they were aired on television. And after watching what you're about to watch, I think you'll understand why.
Oh, what a good girl. Oh, what a good boy. If you sit on my lap today, a kiss, a toy is the price you'll pay.
Yeah, that's fucked. You know, I never quite understood the joy of sitting on Santa's lap. According to my family, when I was a kid, I cried every time I did it. This song does not make me feel any better. Chris is literally asking to sit on his lap and give him a kiss in order for the kids to get their toys. That's fucked. Not to mention, do you see the pink fade around this scene? Any editor or even some casual movie watchers know that that usually signifies some sort of dream sequence or a vision or some shit, which means that this is not really happening. This is in Chris's head. He's dreaming of this shit. And also, this kid has guns. It makes sense why the networks never showed these parts of the movies when they were on television, because if they did, I don't think my family and I would have watched them every year. Anyway, Burgermeister gets mad at Chris for giving away the toys, so Chris pieces out and heads back over to the mountain where he is captured by the Winter Warlock. I also love learning that they made multiple versions of this movie like I mentioned earlier with the networks, and yet they still decided to leave in the fade to black where the commercials would have been. But anyway, Chris tries to bribe his way out of getting killed or beat up, I don't actually know what the Warlock's plan was, by giving him a toy train. Where he pulled that from, I don't want to ask. But in a crazy turn of events, it works, and the Warlock immediately forgives Chris and even starts melting away into a human.
Suddenly my whole outlook has changed.
So here's a lesson, kids. If someone's bothering you, just give them a toy and they will completely turn their life around. I would have saved many relationships had I known that.
Great!
But will it last?
Boy, would you be fun at parties. Hey man, how you doing? I'm good, man. I'm really happy. Good, good. Oh, but will it last? What? Anyway, then Chris tries helping Winter become good by using the metaphor of just taking it one step at a time, just like when you're learning how to walk, which is a great metaphor, except that Winter takes it literally. Apparently, before he met Chris, he didn't know how to walk either. But to thank him, Winter gives Chris a magic snowball in which he can spy and watch anyone sleep at any time. The older I get, the more I disagree with these portrayals of Santa. That's creepy. But Jessica finds Chris and tells him that the kids want more toys. So Chris comes up with a list of every kid that he knows of, you know, after watching all of them sleep. Then once he finishes the list, he grabs the toys and heads back to Sombertown, leaving the list behind. Yeah, I do that too, Chris. When I go to the grocery store, I make sure to make a list of everything I need and then leave behind said list that would help me keep track of everything I need. That makes sense. But then he gets to Sombertown and makes sure he gets this toy to this one little girl who's sick, because I'm sure a toy Noah's Ark will cure her of her leukemia or whatever it is she has. Remember from the intro that I am a soulless asshole. Anyway, Burgermeister keeps getting butthurt. literally, that Chris keeps evading him and is still delivering toys, so he sets a trap for him. Jessica hears this and rushes to the mountain in order to warn Chris, but somehow misses him on the way, which seems impossible because I thought there was only one path through the mountain, so they would have had to have crossed paths, but whatever. Then the lieutenant finds the Kringles and says, and I quote,
"You are all under arrest for defying the law and making toys."
Yeah, you are all under arrest, except Jessica, I guess. Literally just as guilty as the rest of them, if not more, but for some reason she's fine. Then they capture Chris and throw them all in the dungeon. Hey look, there's that book burning scene I mentioned earlier. Then we get to the second reason why my family and I should never have watched the full version of this movie. Jessica's song. You see, Jessica goes on a musical number about her identity. However, it is the most LSD-infused 1970s psychedelic acid trip I've ever seen in my life, and it has no real connection to the rest of the movie whatsoever. From a technical perspective, it's pretty well made, especially from 1970, but my god, why does it exist? Why is there a 2D version of her that is more stop motion than the current stop motion? Why does her reflection not reflect what it is she's doing while reflecting on her reflection? Seriously, why? I could have gone my whole life without seeing this scene. Anyway, then we see her go visit the jail, and I would like to point out something very specific. The jail has ceilings. Just something to note. But we see her talk to Winter, who for some reason has lost all of his magical abilities since he's good now, which I guess is just a lesson that being bad is good. By being good, you can't do any cool magic shit, which is bad. So by being bad, you can do all this cool magic shit apparently, which is good. But while he doesn't have magic, what he does have is this cleverly named concoction called Magic Feed Corn, a concoction that can make reindeers fly and will be the solution to all of their problems. Somehow. See, they all escape using the reindeer, but I don't really get how that works. Winter literally says,
"Well, it's of no use to us. It can't dissolve prison walls. All it can do is make reindeer fly."
And I established that the jail had ceilings. I mean, you can see them. So how did the reindeer actually help them escape? Anyway, they all end up on the run trying to evade the guards of Sombertown. Again, kind of like the Nazis, like when they went after the Von Trapp family in The Sound of Music. And then Chris debuts his new look, which is so vastly different from the Wanted poster.
Let me take a good look at it.
Pretty grand, eh?
Man, does he look the same. Also, it's diabolical to have that kind of beard without a mustache. I'm just saying. But then Jessica and Chris get married. It's all cute and whatever. Chris learns that his real name is Claus. I don't really know where he got the name Santa. Maybe from Satan? I don't know. We don't know. And then decide to build a castle up in the North Pole using who knows what to make it, because I didn't see a single tree in sight, and you need at least one tree in order to get a wooden pickaxe so you can mine the stone if you're going to build the castle out of stone, but whatever. Then time passes. The castle is built and Jessica lets herself go. So does Chris, but of course that's to be expected. Jessica did not have to get that big. I don't mean to fat shame except for the fact that I want to. Then Burgermeister dies and his picture gets thrown out by some saturated kid who I think is a time traveler because his clothes do not match up whatsoever. Then we get to the end of the film where Fred Astaire tries to give us one last lesson.
Everybody must love him.
Well, there still are some.
Bah! Humbug. How can they talk about Santa Claus when there's so much unhappiness in the world?
Poor, misguided folks.
Yeah, poor folks. Good thing there's a lot more happiness in today's world, right? Right? But he tries to tell us that the story was meant to teach us how to be giving and loving, when my takeaway was just, if you want things, bribe them for it. Now, that was a lot to take in. There are a lot of comments and critiques that can be made about this movie, but I have to ask if you guys have noticed anything that could lead back to figuring out my problem that I had in the intro. What is it that's making me and my family be so critical towards these movies? Sure, there's a lot to talk about, but these are children's movies. These are classics. There's got to be something more to this than just they're easy to make fun of, right? I don't know. But for now, we have one more movie to cover, so without further ado, let's get into The Year Without a Santa Claus. Now, The Year Without a Santa Claus from 1974 starts about as well as you'd expect, with my mother immediately pointing out that the H in the North Pole is lowercase for literally no reason. What's even worse is that not 30 seconds later, both of my parents point out that Mrs. C is drying out all of her clothes out in the middle of the North Pole. Yes, Mrs. C, thank you. I also want my clothes to be frozen solid and impossible to be worn by the time they're dry. Anyway, this story revolves around Santa being too tired and too sick to do anything. Quite a lineup of Santas we've got, am I right? We've got one who's skinny and a dick. We've got another who I don't want anywhere near my children. And we've got a third one who's tired, grumpy, and groans way too much. Seriously, listen to this.
Well,
Also, he says here that he has 10 toes, which is a bit weird when he only has 8 fingers. Anyway, so the even grumpier doctor comes in and gets it in Santa's head that no one believes in him anymore. And Santa immediately agrees for some reason and decides that he is due for a holiday, even though he should have a holiday 364 days of the year. But he calls Jingle and Jangle and says he's canceling Christmas. We then see the headlines of Santa canceling Christmas in the news. But what's even more important than that, menagerie breaks loose in New York? Oh shit, that must have been when the animals escaped in Madagascar. Then Santa calls the rest of the elves and tells them to quit working, which leaves Jingle and Jangle surprised, even though they got the call earlier from Santa, so they should already know this. But then the elves get sad that he won't be able to deliver their toys. Also, apparently a white elephant with pink polka dots is considered a misfit, but pink elephants are totally fine. There's definitely some undocumented hypocrisy going on here. Then Mrs. C sings a song about how she could be Santa Claus, but clearly she never watched the first 2 films, because if she did, she would know this is man's work. So instead, she gives Jingle and Jangle the task of going to find some Christmas spirit in order to show Santa that people still care about him. Though she is not very specific on what that means or how to physically obtain that, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to literally kidnap a child. Anyway, right after sending them off on their journey, Mrs. C says this.
I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of confidence, Mrs. C. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Then Santa figures out what Mrs. C is doing after a long drawn out scene with an ironing board that real ones know is an extended scene from the TV version. And then Mrs. C says this.
Now, it's nothing that need concern you. Poor Jingle. Poor Jangle.
Again, a lot of confidence there. But then Santa brings up to Mrs. C that Vixen is just a baby and that they're heading right towards the Miser Brothers, which Mrs. C totally forgot about. Good job, Mrs. C. Then we meet the Miser Brothers, which, hey, look at that. What do you know? But there are these 2 weird-ass beings who also happen to be stepbrothers. I'll get to that part a little later. But Jingle and Jangle accidentally fly right into their path, which is shocking since we learned that each brother controls one half of the world, so why are you guys so close to each other? You guys are literally at the border. Then they make their way to Southtown, USA, which just so happens to be in the South. But then they get pulled over and ticketed for going the wrong way in a one-way street, even though the officer was going the exact same way as them. And also for crossing the white line, which my dad likes to point out doesn't exist in this shot. But Santa also makes his way there to try and rescue them. Apparently he's feeling better even though the doctor put him on bed rest.
You're in trouble already. You better find him quick. Poor little guys must be scared to death.
I'm scared to death.
I don't know, man. That was funny. Then Jingle and Jangle go to talk to these kids about Santa, but discover that Vixen is getting sick due to the heat. Now in this scene, after everything I've commented on so far, you'd think I'd complain about the fact that Ignatius waited to tell them that the dog catcher was getting Vixen before it was too late, or the fact that he has insanely buck teeth. And you'd be right. Those teeth are massive and Timmy Turner's got some competition. But the real thing with this scene is what is going on with her. Blink. Blink. Do something. Just blink. Anyway, then Santa defies the laws of physics by hiding behind this tree as Ignatius passes him.
Hi there, little fella.
My name's Ignatius Thistlewhite. What's yours?
Claus. Claus.
Santa, it is literally not hard to come up with a new name. You should have just said Ken Adams. But his family welcomes Santa in and he asks the kid if he believes in Santa, in which he says no, which makes complete and total sense, especially when he mentioned earlier that the news was saying Santa was taking a holiday, implying that he does exist and is in fact real. I don't quite understand the lore of this world. Does he believe in Santa and just not care? Or does he not believe in Santa even though the entire world says he exists? Anyway, Santa and Ignatius's dad sing a whole song about believing in Santa, showcasing a time when Santa was in his dad's room watching him sleep when he was a kid. And as my parents and I have said many times, that's creepy. It's bad enough to watch someone sleep through a magic snowball, but to be physically standing over their bed is straight psychotic behavior, and I will not apologize for thinking that way. But the song ends with the mom having no lines whatsoever and just nodding her head in agreement. Take that as you will. I am tired of making these jokes as I'm starting to feel as sexist as the male characters. Then after all of that, Ignatius finally tells Santa about the dog catcher, something he probably should have started with and not wasted all of their time with the song. Then Santa leaves and Ignatius talks to his dad about what to do.
When you've got a big problem
problem, son, it often pays to go right to the top man. Why don't you stop by the mayor's office?
Yeah, that is absolutely not what you should be doing in today's age. These lessons are outdated. Anyway, then we meet the crazy mayor who doesn't believe anything the elves are saying, but does agree to let Vixen go if they are able to make it snow in Southtown. And even though he doesn't believe it to be true whatsoever, he does go on an entire song singing about how it's going to snow there. Also, Charlie Chaplin's there for some reason. We also meet an ancestor of Gru from Despicable Me, because my god, what a nose. I would take the red glowing one over that. Then Santa rescues Vixen without any trouble and without telling anyone that he did that, which leads to Jingle, Jangle, Ignatius, and Mrs. C going to see Snow Miser. Also, it looks like I was right in the fact that they did low-key kidnap a child. It's here though where we arguably get the best song out of all of the movies we've covered today. Seriously, it's a banger song and you can't argue with me on that. I do wish he wore pants though.
I'm Mr. White Christmas. I'm Mr. Snow.
Anyway, they try to convince Snow Miser to let it snow in Southtown, but unfortunately he can't because his brother controls it. So they head to Heat Miser's place with the same slowed down banger of a song, only with much creepier looking minions, who hold shovels for some reason. I also want to point out that in Snow Miser's song, he says he doesn't want anything over 40 degrees, but in Heat Miser's song, he says he doesn't want anything under 60 degrees. So who the hell controls the temperature between 40 and 60 degrees? Is there like a third average temperature brother? Do we find out in the Miser Brother specials that I never want to watch? Anyway, the gang tries to convince Heat Miser to let Snow Miser let it snow in the south, which not surprisingly he says no unless he gets to heat up the North Pole for a day. So they end up calling Snow Miser, which I don't know why the hell you didn't do that when you were at Snow Miser's place, but whatever. And they try to talk it out. Also, it seems like the Miser brothers were the first to invent FaceTime. My dad likes to point out too that they must be sentient since they are able to hear each other without holding the phone, and their powers can work across said FaceTime, which is interesting. Anyway, Mrs. C has no luck with the brothers, so she ends up going to the top man, Mother Nature. And it's here where I have to ask, if Mother Nature is their mother and their stepbrothers, who are their fathers? My guess for Snow Miser would maybe be Jack Frost, Frosty the Snowman, Uncle Sam from Rudolph, I don't know. For Heat Miser, Satan? Anyway, Mother Nature puts her boys in check for Mrs. C, but it's this scene that has annoyed my family for years, because it's backwards. You see, she first tells Snow Miser to let it snow in the south, and he seems mad, which he shouldn't because that's what he wanted. And Heat Miser looks happy after she said that, which he shouldn't. And when she says that Heat Miser should let it be warm in the North Pole for a day, he gets mad, which again, he shouldn't. I'm just saying, they got this completely backwards. Anyway, it all works out and it ends up snowing in Southtown, which gives the town a reason to believe again, even though I wasn't actually sure if they ever didn't believe or not. I don't know. But the world ends up turning Santa's canceled Christmas into a national holiday for Santa instead. And then they have this whole scene from everyone around the world coming together to wrap presents for Santa. A scene that probably felt really inclusive at the time, but in today's day and age will probably be seen as racist. Then Santa gets a letter from this little girl who sings a sad song about not getting Christmas. But she never explains why she's sad. Like, did you need a bigger bow or something? Honestly, she sounds like an entitled, spoiled little brat if you ask me. She basically says she'll have a terrible Christmas if you don't bring her free stuff. You know, I might have a certain doll that could cheer her up, but the real craziness of the scene is how in the actual fuck is she able to write like that? She was writing like 2 to 3 letters at a time. Girl, that's some serious talent right there. Anyway, that letter is enough to rid Santa of his tiredness, sickness, and grumpiness, because plot. And he puts Christmas back on schedule. It ends with him going to Southtown where everyone's happy to see him. Well, almost everyone. That one lady doesn't seem to give a shit. But he shows up on Santa Claus Lane and then leaves. Literally doesn't stop to give away presents, he just rides on through. Now he's gonna have to come back later and deliver those presents. So I don't know what the point was there. But it ends all well and good, and Santa is back to being the Santa Claus we all know and tolerate. Now, that was a lot of talking and a lot of fun negativity, as I'd like to call it. But to be honest, I did not get any closer to figuring out why it is that I treat these movies so harshly, especially when I really like these movies. But I did learn something. I learned that when I was making all of these jokes and comments, it wasn't as fun as it usually is. And I think I know why. I was alone. I didn't have my family to watch it with. I realized about halfway through recording today that most of the jokes and comments I make are to try to get my parents to laugh, or more realistically roll their eyes, but you know, same thing. And it's the same thing with some of their comments, is to make all of us laugh and have a good time. You know, I seriously struggled to come up with a point for this video because I really wanted to go over these movies, but I wanted to make it more than just me making fun of them. But I could not come up with anything until now. I think I finally figured it out. It has nothing to do with making fun of them. I was thinking about it, and it's not about the movies at all. You see, I feel like most families, they tend to bond by like going on vacations or camping or shopping or, you know, Sunday dinners, things like that. For my family, we bond over ordering a pizza and watching a movie. That's how we do it. And thinking about how we've been making fun of these movies more and more every year, I realize that's just us growing closer. That's just us being more comfortable with each other, being able to say whatever the hell we want because we love and trust each other. And I mean, sure, picking on some children's Christmas movies using some seriously fucked up dark humor is probably not the nicest thing in the world, and these movies definitely don't deserve that. But for me, I've learned it's just being able to spend time with my family. Now, I know my family's probably gonna roll their eyes when they watch this part because they know that I have this whole thing scripted and I'm just reading off of my computer, which is 100% true. I can't word well off the top of my head. But while I didn't necessarily plan it, I want to dedicate this video to you guys. You guys have been there for me since the very beginning, and you've supported me in every single thing I've ever done. You've always been there. And I know I'm trying to repay you guys by making fun of movies on the internet, but I want you to know that the Christmas magic in me is not gone, it's just changed. I grew up watching these movies for Santa, the flying reindeer, the presents, but now I just look forward to sitting down with you guys and watching a few Christmas movies, maybe making fun of them on the way. And these movies, like I theorized, are just simply easy to make fun of, but they're not going anywhere. They are staying on that list. I will watch them every year until the day I die. But watching them with you guys is something I love doing every year, and it's something that I wouldn't trade for the world. I love you guys. I can picture my mom going, whatever. I spent way too long on this video. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks you'll like this one. Please go watch it. I need to make my family proud and also make the money. Okay, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'll see you in the next video.